welcome to Cafe 229. Today we have a very special guest, Venerable Nicholas Vreeland, and I'm going to co-host with Dr. Joanne Chen. Dr. Joanne Chen is a music professor and concert pianist. Hello, Joanne.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Thank you for the invite, and it's an honor to meet Venerable Nikki.
So we're very happy to have Venerable Nicholas Vreeland. Often we call him Venerable Nicky. He is the abbot of the Rato Monastery, which is a very well-respected monastery, or I guess Buddhist university. Sometimes the founder called it the Tiger Nest, a place where to train Buddhist scholars. He is also the director of the Tibet Center, the oldest Tibetan Buddhist Center in New York City. And another special thing about Venerable Nicky is that he holds a Geshe degree, which is the sort of the equivalent of the Buddhist PhD. So Venerable Nicky is a very well-respected and well-trained Buddhist monk and Buddhist scholar. But I think what he was most well-known, one of the most well-known things we know about him is really his film, A Monk with a Camera. He is a great photographer, and he is his photography work is really very eye-catching and very meaningful and very inspiring. So we're very happy to have Venerable Nicky. Hello, Venerable.
How are you? It's a pleasure to be here. I thank you for having invited me.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us. I myself, as a photographer, and you don't know how happy I am to meet you, because I'm interested in photography, Buddhism, and you're sort of the ideal for this field. You know, we don't have too many photographers who are also well-respected Buddhist monks. You're rare. But I think what most people don't know about you and why there's a film about you is really your background is so interesting. For those who don't know, Venerable came from a very well-established family, and his grandma was actually a very well-known, I guess they call her the Empress of the fashion world, Diana Vreeland. I guess she's very well known, right? But I think when I hear Venerable's story, it reminds me of the story of Siddhartha, because Siddhartha came from a very well-known and very well-established family who had good training, who has everything. Yet he still looking for something more meaningful, not for himself but also for others. So your story really inspired me in the sense that you remind me of Siddhartha's story. Can you share with us how you got involved with Buddhism in the first place? Like, what triggers you to become interested in Dharma?
I don't know what it is that leads one, that pulls one towards a spiritual path. It's hard to really say what that is, because I don't think it's something that is necessarily from this life. When I was in my early 20s, I developed some kind of interest in spiritual matters, and eventually a friend brought me to the Tibet Center, and I began listening to the teachings being given by Khyongla Rato Rinpoche at this place called the Tibet Center in New York, and studying with Khyongla Rato Rinpoche.
So it seems like Khyongla Rato Rinpoche is a very important figure in your life, because he's well respected in the Buddhist community to start with. So for those who all met him, we knew he's really very wise. It seems like he has an important role in your spiritual path.
Yes. he is my teacher, and he has really led me along for, as I say, 43 years from when I met him. And I was a photographer in New York City, a freelance photographer, and there were many freelance photographers in New York, and therefore I didn't have much work, and I had lots of time to devote to helping Rinpoche. And I had the extraordinary opportunity to really study with him as he was writing a book, dictating it to me. And another very fortunate thing was that one day someone broke into my apartment and took all my camera equipment, which was very well insured. And so I was able to not worry too much about having to make money. Just study with Rinpoche.
Oh, wow. So I, as an artist myself, I'm curious about how initially, or for all the paths you have walked, how do you integrate Buddhism into your photography, or photography into your Buddhism? I mean, is it a seamless work, or does it one inspire the other one?
So when I became a monk, I didn't own a camera. As I say, all my cameras were taken from me. And so when I came to India, because I'm in India, when I came here to join the monastery, I didn't own a camera. And so it was very simple to have these two parts of my life kept separate. Then my brother gave me a camera, and suddenly I had a camera, and I would keep it locked up in a trunk. And I was a little afraid of that trunk. And I would every once in a while open it and take the camera out and put film in it and take whatever pictures I had to take. I didn't want people to know that I knew how to take pictures. This was 35 years ago, before everyone had a camera in their phones. I brought to India Kodachrome film, and I kept it in the refrigerator. I bought a refrigerator, and I kept my film in the refrigerator. And in India, in those days, we would go for 1 or 2 weeks without electricity. And so the film went from being very, very, very cold to suddenly being very, very, very hot. And I couldn't really trust it anymore. So my relationship with photography was a little bit difficult, let's say. And then suddenly a photographer came to the monastery and asked me to help in the taking of a series of portraits of young incarnate lamas. Mm. And she was a wonderful photographer called Martine Franck, and she was the wife of really one of the most important and famous photographers of our time, Henri Cartier-Bresson. And we talked about photography and talked over a period of days. And she said to me, you know, you have such a passion for photography. You really should take pictures. You should really not hold yourself back. And I said to her, you know, photography is like the piano. You have to play your scales every day if you want to really make music. If you don't do your scales, you won't make music. And in photography, if you don't take pictures, you won't be able to really express yourself photographically. And she said, do your scales. Just, you know, take daily pictures to keep yourself, maintain the vitality of your craft. And so I did. I started to. And that's when I began to bring photography into my Buddhist monastic life. So I'm very thankful to Martine for having pushed me to do that.
Oh, so after you picked up the camera as your tool, do you feel that the two paths crossed, or is there a parallelism in your practice and in practice photography? You know, as you put it, it's a skill you need to maintain. And do you see the connections between those two, or do they inspire each other and integrate each other to help in general in your practice and or in your photography skill?
So I'm not sure that I can answer that question the way you are posing it. What I will try to do is answer it there was an exhibition of photography at the Museum of Modern Art. I suppose it would have been sometime in the 70s, called Windows and Mirrors, or Mirrors and Windows, I'm not sure which. And the curator of photography, or the director of photography, John Sarkowski, was introducing the idea that there are those photographers who photograph as a reflection of themselves. Those are the mirror photographers. And then there are the photographers who are photographing what's out there. Those are the window photographers. But what he was really telling us in this wonderful exhibition was that a real window photographer is really reflecting himself in his photographs. And a real mirror photographer has to make use of the elements, the compositional elements that are before him or her. In other words, it's not so clear. So whether photography and my spiritual life are parallel, whether they cross, my belief is that we lead our lives, we work on ourselves, our meditation, our study, our contemplation, we lead as rich a spiritual life as we can, prayer, and those practices, those spiritual practices, affect us. And they inform who we are, how we feel, and how we see. And so it is with, let's say, that lifestyle or that training or that practice that when we go out and take pictures, the pictures are taken by someone who has been affected by that practice. And I would think that the same thing would be true for you playing the piano. It's not that you meditate and then play the piano and consider that the meditation is going to affect the way you play the piano. It's that you have a life that includes your meditation. And when you sit and you play the piano, of course that will affect. It affects who you are.
Yes, absolutely. You answer my question. I think as an artist or performing artist, we need to polish our skill on the regular basis. And as a spiritual practitioner, like you are, we meditate on the daily basis. So it's a technique, really. We are trying to become better at. So I see those two parallel, but they are crossing because they are helping each other. It's almost like, of course, sometimes we see it as an attachment, a little bit of like for me, it's a skill that for me to survive. So there's certainly parallel, but you absolutely answer my question. It supports each other. It kind of a mirror how I should be practicing mindfulness and meditation regularly to polish my skill, and that same thing to go to my performance skills. And the spiritual part supports my understanding to, it's like opens up the window for me into the art and into the photography for you. That's where I was coming from.
But you know, whether it's with music or whether it's with photography, in photography, there was a whole school of photographers who believed in meditating and then going out and taking pictures that were somehow influenced by the meditation. There was a man by the name of Rainer White who taught at MIT and who had students who took this forward. And it's an important, as I say, school of photography or method of taking pictures. And there was something very self-conscious about this process. I'm not a believer in that. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. It's just not something that I apply to myself. And as you were saying, technique, I think that in order to take pictures, you have to be a master of the technique of, you know, what you're doing, as you have to be a master of the technique of piano playing. But I don't believe in having the process, let's say the spiritual process, be a self-conscious or a conscious aspect of picture taking. No. And, you know, there are people who play whatever the musical instrument is, and they do it, they sort of, it's meditative music. I'm not interested in that. If you're playing Mozart, you play what Mozart wrote in the music. If you're, whatever it is. But as I say, that's just one way of doing it. There are wonderful other ways of expressing oneself.
Sure, I agree with you. I wasn't thinking about like a formal schooling of that. I think in the past, in Chinese history, excuse me, many masters were also calligraphy, who wrote a lot of calligraphy and drew a lot of nature, and also they were great, poet, writer. They were great poets, and they wrote a lot of poems. And I think they were a lot of a spiritual insight and within their frame of work. And I was just thinking about, well, those are the masters. Are you thinking maybe you are also more like that? It's a natural connection to you that you drawn to with that path there. I guess that's where I was coming from.
I love I love your analogy on the window photography and the mirror photography. I think that is a very vivid image. I can see how doesn't matter you're meditating or taking photography, both has something to do with helping us to seeing ourselves differently, or it's a pathway to understand ourselves a bit better, to have a more insight into ourselves. What do you think is the challenge as a photographer or as a Buddhist practitioner that help, like what is the challenge of helping people, of preventing people to have a better insight of who they are?
So when you talk about the influence that what I do might have on someone else, that's not a place that I sort of go to in a serious way. I think that as a monk, I'm working on myself. I'm not, I don't want to have the pretense of being a teacher. I want to simply work on myself. Anyone who is interested in what I'm doing and wishes to try to do something similar, fine. But I'm not trying to influence other people. I'm really I have a lot of work to do on myself. The relationship between photography and my spiritual work. So one of the challenges that I have is that photography can really overwhelm me. And so keeping it at bay, keeping a certain control over it, is a challenge. I think that in our spiritual work, at the end of the day, the work that we do, the meditation that we do, the studies that we do, the contemplation that we do, those things are more important than our photography. And photography can easily creep in and sort of take up more of my time than I know I should be devoting to it. And so to maintain that balance is a challenge, is a let's say a spiritual bit of work that I have to be vigilant about, that I have to really maintain control over my photography, because it could easily take me over. I'm not sure that I consider photography to be a means for influencing other people in a conscious way, for cultivating compassion in anyone, including myself. I just take pictures, and they are a reflection of who I am and where I am and what I am right now. That's all. I don't want to pretend that there's anything more. My pictures don't. I believe that if someone is a compassionate person, the photographs are going to somehow convey qualities of that compassion. But it's not that you take the picture with the idea of expressing compassion. It's that your compassion is expressed through those images naturally. I see it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's a wonderful way to put it. Instead of using a spiritual practice as a tool, it's the instrument that is actually a tool, and we apply it to reflect on where we are within our practice and within our mind. That kind of, and it goes through the lenses or goes through the music for me to connect with people in that way. Does that?
I wonder. This is a question to you, and I will start by saying, I don't think that I have the degree of self-discipline necessary to stop taking pictures. I'm pulled to photography, and I wonder whether you feel the same way about music.
Well, I'm not a monk, and this is my livelihood. In a way, actually, it's a skill I need to maintain, and of course, I have to balance between, hoping to, practice mindfulness daily as well as my work in perfecting the skill. It is a balance for me, because I also try to do some compassion in action work, but I certainly I don't I wouldn't feel like that struggle as much. If I do, it would be more like, oh, I wish I could dedicate myself more and not having to perfect the skill that I will eventually let go, towards, but our practice won't, it will stay with us. So I guess that's that I have a different take on that.
So it's not that you play the piano out of a deep love for piano.
I do have deep love, but I do have a big interest in learning Buddhism as well. And okay, so now you put it, maybe I do have some struggle, but it hasn't come to my attention that I'm torn apart to that extent. Yes, yeah. So, well, back to you, Nikki. Venerable Nikki. So what was the transformation from you being a photographer to now where you are as a monk who uses photography as, I don't know, maybe you treat it as your hobby or your expressing tool? Is there like a spiritual transformation, shifting your focus from being a photographer to a spiritual practitioner?
Well, one of the things that I realize is that I am now a true amateur of photography. I'm no longer a professional. I gave up being a professional when I became a monk. So when I began to take photographs as a monk, I do it out of a love for photography. And amateur, amare is to love. And to do something out of love is to be an amateur. And I don't, in that sense, in the sense that I don't have to support myself by photography, I can do it out of that love. There has been no real transition. I've been able to really have the two be part of my life.
Well, that's the best thing. That sounds wonderful to me.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear you both of your conversation, because both of you are, I guess, artists in some way, and how art inspire you to do certain thing is very. I guess we can all relate to how art can be inspirational. And I also love the way you talk about how if you play Mozart, just play Mozart. If you take photos, just take photos. Don't be contriving, right? I mean, don't like use photography as a way to meditate. I mean, it's just not natural in some way. So I love that naturalness that you talk about, which I think that's what spiritual practice does, right? Like the more we practice spiritually, the more it really blends into our behaviors, in all aspects of behaviors. Mm-hmm. In some way, I actually see spiritual practice itself is an art. It is an art form. It is I don't know how you feel about that, because I think like my profession is a psychologist, and I help people to deal with difficulties in life. And often I see therapy as a form of art, meaning like life itself is a art. It's like a jazz. You have to play spontaneously the best way you can. So I wonder, do you see like the similarity between photography and dharma in some way?
Maybe I'm not quite good enough at it to be able to see it that way. I still, as I mentioned before, struggle with keeping photography at bay and really maintaining my practice strictly. When I go out and take pictures, let's say in the monastery, I try to just look. I try to look as clearly, as straightforwardly, as unjudgmentally as I can. I try to bring that sort of simple, straightforward view to picture taking, and I try, for example, to. It's not that I'm trying to photograph beautiful things. I'm trying to photograph whatever is before me in a way that I can bring together and create something beautiful, or put together elements that make something that is interesting, or that it's the game I play. And I have no idea whether that's of interest to anyone but me, but that's what I do, and it's not something that I feel necessarily conveys a message. It's just images. My teacher of photography used to talk about putting the elements, the physical elements, the plastic he would talk about, together in a way that gives a certain vitality to the image that you're creating. I do that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very realistic and very direct reflection of where you're coming from. I think that's a great perspective. I think many occasions, I guess, many artists are overthinking or over-expressing simple things to its complications, and that can be the problems that, in the direct presentation or in our in life, in details of our lives. So I guess I guess my question would be coming to the more like a Buddhism part. You are a Westerner, and you practice Tibetan Buddhism, and you are also the director for the Tibetan Center. I guess what is from my I do have a lot of Latin students who call themselves Catholic, but they haven't really attended churches for a very long time. So I get the feeling of the religion and the faith are diminishing in this century in the youngsters. What would be the advice, or how do you think we can approach them to spread Dharma, or to make the religion part of their life again? That's essential and hopefully important. What would be your advice for doing that from a lay person's perspective?
So, regrettably, it's true that religion, sort of formal practice of religion, is really far less a part of people's lives today. But what's most important is not that we be religious, it's that we be good people. And good people means that we care about others, that we work. We can't really, I think a very important thing is that we cannot change others. We can change ourselves. And true religious practice is a process of making ourselves better people. Whether it's out of a belief in God, our creator, and out of faith in God, we try to live a life that would be in accordance with God's wishes. And I think that all of that can be done without a belief in God. It can be done without a belief in any formal religious practice. It can be done out of a realization that other people are quite similar to ourselves, wish to be happy, and that if we can in some way help them, we will be happier as well. We will make the world a happier place, and it will, as I say, affect us too. I think that the sort of simple logic of that is something that one can convey to young people. And I think that the younger you are, the more you can recognize that sharing brings greater happiness than hoarding, that being patient brings more happiness than getting angry when you don't get your way. Rejoicing in someone else's accomplishments is so much more wonderful for yourself than being jealous, envious. All of those things can be cultivated by someone. We have to do it ourselves, and as we do it, we are somehow imparting that to those around us.
Yeah, I love the way you present yourself. I think one thing I have noticed through our interview so far is, Venerable Nikki, you're very humble. And you're very humble about the way you do your photography. You're very humble about your practice. I think, at least in the Chinese world, we say one of the best way to teach is do modeling. Like it's not how much dharma you can talk, but how much you can present yourself. So I really see the way you present yourself really can inspire a lot of young people. And I think you're right. Like, we should work on ourselves before trying to change others. I mean, this is just a very simple fact. Somehow we all worry about changing others instead of changing ourselves. So your example on how your struggle or your conflict between your dharma practice and your photography is a really a wonderful way of demonstrating to us that all of us have the same kind of struggle or attachment. We all struggle with something that's similar. So how do you deal, like what is your daily practice? Like if in a simple words, what is your daily practice that help you to balance or like to balance your attachment versus your Dharma practice? Like what would you recommend?
So you talk about the word attachment. You use the word a few times. And I want to call attention to the word and to the way you apply it, because I think that it could be helpful. When we approach something with attachment, we are sort of setting ourselves up to be unhappy. When we approach something without attachment, we just do it, then we can be delighted and delight those around us. Attachment is an affliction, and attachment is something that leads to more attachment. Attachment is something that you can never quite quench. It just brings more and more desire for things. And in our tradition, let's say we have attachment to, I don't know, watches or cell phones or cameras. If we can really sit and contemplate the fact that I have a watch, it tells me the time. That's what a watch is meant to do. It keeps the time properly. Be content with that, because as soon as I have two watches, I'm going to want a third watch, and I'm going to get dissatisfied with my watch after a certain amount of time and want another watch. And that process is one that I can never satisfy. It just leads me by the nose farther and farther. Same with cameras. And we are up against the advertising industry that is desperately trying to get us to buy another camera because the new camera has this many megapixels and whatever. We have to stay clear, and we have to realize that it's a tool and it works, and use it, use what you have, and use it carefully and use it well. And when you need to upgrade the tool for technical reasons, then of course just do it. But don't get sucked into that whole attachment that the advertising world is desperately trying to cultivate in us. So attachment, as I say, is something that we have to push against. We have to work at diminishing. And that work against attachment is spiritual work. Because as we apply that, as we logically decompose that sort of being sucked into wishing to buy something, we get calmer. To be content with what you have brings a certain calmness, steadiness, peace of mind to us. And if we can recognize that, we can hold on to it. That is like one of the building blocks in developing true contentment with what we have, which is the opposite of attachment.
Love the way you put it. It's really like to be grateful of what you already have, to cultivate that gratitude of what's already present in front of you is a very important practice. I mean, I can totally identify what you just said, because when I start photography, like Joanne can tell you, I start with the one lens, and then I'm like, oh, I need to get another lens, and then I need to get another camera, and then another lens. It's like a never end until you realize, oh, I better stop.
But no, don't think that you will get to a point where you have succeeded. It's a work in progress. Mm-hmm. When you finally feel content with what you have, then slowly but steadily technology evolves and you need something else. And if you can try to maintain the attitude that this is a tool, and try to sort of control that process. But we're going to be challenged. The spiritual path is not one that we suddenly attain and we, slide along like being on a bobsled going downhill. No, it's going uphill.
So it's like a constant process of impermanence that you never should think or have an attitude thinking, oh, I'm done with it, as you put it. Like it's always a working process, working progress. And it just brought me to think about this movie. There's a sushi master, of course, we are vegetarians, Buddhists, sushi master who is the top of Japanese cuisine. And he said one thing in his movie. He said, you just keep climbing, and knowing there's no peak and top of that. Is that the similar things you are referring to?
Well, I do think that you eventually might, in many, 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 many lifetimes, attain enlightenment. But at our level, I don't think that we can assume that we're going to get there anytime soon, and that the opportunities to learn, to work on ourselves are good ones. We would even say that, we have friends, we are always happy to be with our friends. We have enemies, and we try to avoid the enemies. In fact, the friends cultivate attachment in us. The enemies provide us with the opportunity to develop patience.
Absolutely.
So we should think of the enemy as being more valuable than the friend.
That is a practitioner's view, very good view, but so difficult for us.
So I think our time is running out, but we have not seen Venerable Nikki's photos yet. I think it would be wonderful to have our audience just to take a look at what Venerable had done in his daily life, his daily practice. Since photography now is his daily routine, we would love to see what kind of photos that he has taken. Would you mind to share with us some of your work?
So I will show you a little series of photographs that I've been taking in the monastery during lockdown. I live up on the second floor, and once a day I would go downstairs and just walk around the grounds of the monastery, which are quite empty now because everyone is in his room. And I would photograph the trees of the monastery. So I will show you some pictures. I use very straightforward, simple prime lenses. This is taken with a 50 millimeter lens. I work with a 35. I really stick to those two lenses. And I really am trying to photograph, as I said before, what's in front of me.
Great.
I'm not trying to photograph beautiful things. I'm trying to photograph, to create images that work. I'm not really focusing on the, let's say, on the outside there. I'm trying to put the elements before me together harmoniously.
Nice.
I noticed that you use a lot of black and white colors.
So I decided 5 years ago to have a camera that only shoots in black and white. So the main camera that I use has a sensor that doesn't capture color. It only captures black and white. It's a rather old-fashioned type of camera. It's a rangefinder camera. I have to focus. I have to set my aperture. And so I have a certain amount of control over, or I impose upon myself the need to control certain things, the focus and the f-stop in particular. And I do that because I really feel that it's important to be in control of focus, and it's important to determine the amount of depth of field in the photograph. When I need control over my speed or my the sensitivity of the sensor, the ISO, I exert that as well. But I'm particularly formal about, or I particularly want to maintain control over focus and f-stop. And I find that to do so has really helped me remain focused when I photograph.
That sounds very interesting to me.
A 50 lens is one of my most favorite lenses. That's the one I use the most. And black and white 50, I love the same kind of style you're doing. I think for me, it's that naturalness. 50 is a very natural lens for me, not contrived.
You know, it's interesting because I would say that 80 to 85% of the photographs I take are with a 35 millimeter lens. When I put a 50 millimeter lens on the camera, I find that it really forces me to compose carefully. It's tough, it hurts, and yet I find that the photographs are that much more, let's say, I'm afraid to say more powerful, but more well composed.
So can we say in this case, it's less is more?
No, I don't think that 50 is less and therefore is more. No, no, I'm not sure. No, because even, maintaining control over my focus and my f-stop is not a question of less. It's a question of, and it's not simpler than having everything automatic or using a zoom lens. It's just maintaining control over certain elements of the creative process.
Well, like what you say, it's a balance, right? It is a form of balance.
Well, I think it's an individual thing. This is a photograph that's very simple. I was up on the roof and I looked down and there was this palm frond, and I decided to focus on it and keep the leaves at the bottom a little bit out of focus. And I like the sort of balance or the harmony of the form it takes within the rest. And I photographed it in a way that does that. I don't know that that's simple, or it's just what it is. Here, again, this must be a 50. The fact that the leaves in the foreground here on the right-hand side are out of focus. The temple is a little bit in the distance. You don't see much of it, but you get the atmosphere of the sort of monsoon, rainy season. It stopped raining. The sky is gray.
Wonderful. So Venerable, I think you can show us a few more, and then we will need to wrap up. We went way over time now. So we're supposed to do it for 40 minutes. I think we'll get too excited talking to you. This is what happened.
Okay, I'll go a little bit quickly with these.
Sure, thank you.
This is just a walk around the grounds.
I really love the way you really capture you really capture the essence. That wind just came at the right time.
Well, I waited, and then suddenly it was right.
Wow, that's like a perfect win.
So this one I should mention, this is bougainvillea, so it's very colorful. It's full of purples and reds and whatever, and I just love it in black and white.
Then there's something about black and white that's very charming to me, because I do a lot of black and white myself, and that's why I love your work to start with. So
this, for example, is a composition of, a lot of people would say, goodness gracious, why have you photographed that? And I can't tell you why, but I've tried to put these parts together in a way that make it express the atmosphere, the moment.
To capture that reality.
Here too, this is my robe, which was washed and is drying, and I think that's it.
Thank you so much. This is like the picture of the COVID time, but it really have the peacefulness to it. So we thank you very much again for being with us, and give us a wonderful teaching about Dharma, photography, and art. I'm sure our audience has also many questions. So now we're going to go to Q&A, where we're going to have more questions for you. Great. Again, that was a wonderful presentation by Venerable Nikki, and I'm sure that our audience will start to have some questions. I will be taking care of the Q&A part right now, and now I'm start to look at the Q&A on our website, the question that people have. So here's one question. What do you think is the relationship between art and compassion, if there's any? I think in the discussion, we talked a little bit about how if you are a compassionate person, then naturally what you do should be compassionate. I mean, that's what we were talking about. But what do you think about the relationship between art and compassion? Is there any relationship at all? Venerable Nikki.
First of all, I should say I don't quite understand what art means. So, having said that, I think that compassion, of course, is the wish to remove the suffering of others. And that wish is something that in our spiritual work, we try to cultivate. We are all sort of naturally selfish, self-centered. And as we work at diminishing that and developing our concern for others, we become more compassionate. Art, instead of thinking of art in terms of, that painting is art, but our expressing ourselves in a creative manner, let's say that that's what art is. As we cultivate compassion, that will somehow affect the way in which we go about expressing ourselves in a creative manner.
Excellent. It's great answer. I love the fact you say you don't know what art is. I think everyone have a different concept of what art is. I mean, one of my quick question was always, as a photographer, what do you think is the best photo in your mind? Like, what is the best photo, right? Because we were talking about attachment of making photography, and then we all sort of attach to some form of art. So like we all want to take that great photo. What is the best photo for you?
So I think that the idea of there being a best is something that has to be put aside. As I walk along through life with my camera, I work at photographing, putting together elements in the frame of my camera in a way that is harmonious. And as I said earlier, it's not a question of photographing beautiful things. It's a question of putting those elements together in a way that might be beautiful. And, when you're photographing a person, you're trying to, the form of the person, the atmosphere of the person, all of those things you want to work at bringing together in a way that conveys something, that glows in some way. So I don't know that I could say that that's the best photograph, but that's what I work at doing when I photograph.
Well, I love your naturalness, and there's the sense of just being natural and non-contriving. And a question related to art is actually, here is another one. So thank you, Nicholas. I'm curious, how would you encourage people to deal with the current pandemic? I think what I have observed is that during this pandemic time, people are actually staying at home a lot more, but yet I think people start come up creative things to do. So, which here's another question: is how do you think we can become a good artist? I guess we can mix those two questions together, right? It's a tough time now. As a Buddhist teacher, what do you encourage people to do at this tough time? And how art may help us do that?
So I think that the most important thing we have to do is be careful, is lead our lives with care. I think that this pandemic provides us with the responsibility to lead our lives as carefully as we can, to protect ourselves, to protect our loved ones, to protect everyone. And that's, I think that has a sort of connection to spiritual work. Spiritual work is work that we do on ourselves. It's not affecting other people. Of course, as we work on ourselves, that in itself has an effect on other people, as we've discussed. And I think that our responsibility towards other people is assumed by the way we ourselves behave. And I think that this pandemic provides us with that, the opportunity to really be careful, approach every situation with mindfulness, with care. In terms of there are many people who are in this terrible situation of not really having the choice, having the opportunity to really be as careful as they feel they should be. And that's tragic, that's regrettable. But we, to the extent that we can be careful and can be mindful of how we behave. Art, as I say, I don't think that there can be a sort of formal quality to ourselves as an artist. We just do it. If we are a musician, we play our instrument. We try to master the technique to the degree that we can, because it is only with that mastery of the technique that we can produce music, that we can produce art, or something that is creative. So I do want to emphasize the importance of mastery over technique in order to be creative.
I think it's that's a great response. I think during the COVID time, it is important to be careful, because I think if you're not careful, you're even especially during the COVID time, you will influence other people, right? I mean, you will hurt other people if you're not careful yourself. So the fact that you said mastery is important, I think COVID time is a good time where we just stay home and practice whatever we need to practice and perfect our art form. I think creativity only comes really after you're familiar with your camera, right? I mean, like if you're not even good with the basic photo skills, it's hard to be creative until that becomes a second nature of yours. I think. Now, here's another question related to, I think it's related to Buddhist logic now. Your Rato Monastery teaches Buddhist logic and philosophy. What are the key teachings that you think would be helpful for non-Buddhists? I'm going to connect this to art again a little bit, because I remember Heidegger talk a little bit about how art is actually a way to reveal something that we're not aware of. That's the way he translates art. Art as a way to reveal true nature of reality. So how do you connect that with the teaching of Rato Monastery?
So yesterday, as I walked around the mountains here in northern India, in Dharamsala, with my camera, I thought about this. And I viewed each of the scenes that I was trying to put together as photographs, realizing that they were not photographs. What I'm aiming my camera at is not a photograph. What I'm aiming my camera at is a forest, is a tree, is a scene. And it is I who, by choosing the elements that I put into my frame, create. It is I who create the photograph. And Buddhist philosophy teaches that things do not exist inherently. That when I look at a tree, for example, it's not that there is some kind of inherently existent tree there. There are branches, and there's the trunk, and there are leaves, all of which I give the name tree to. And so there is a direct relationship between what I am doing as I think about taking a photograph this way, and what Nagarjuna is teaching us about the existence of the tree. And if I can really think like that, if I can really force myself to continue to see what I am experiencing before me as being not inherently there, but my naming, my viewing, my sort of applying my own subjective decision that that is my photograph. To me, that's the way I play with concepts of Buddhist philosophy as I go about photographing.
I think what you're saying is very much the way we perceive reality. The reality is a flux, it's complicated, but our mind almost make it into a photograph. Like we look at a river and we take the picture of the river, and now we sort of rarefy or solidify that river into a thing instead of seeing a river as a river. And I guess that illusory nature really influences the way we see ourselves, seeing the world, and seeing other people, and it really limit us in some way. So I think the way you explain it, actually photos is a good analogy of how we limit our perception in a very thin slice. Right. It's
so
like,
I'll add to that the fact that in terms of what we do in the monastery, we are working at it, let's say, from the other point of view, where we are coming to understand that dependent or non-inherent quality to what we experience, what we see, the tree before us, in a logical way. We actually view the tree, realize that when we see it, we say, oh, that's a tree. And then we start to look for where the tree is among its parts and come to the conclusion through removing the parts that there is no tree, that there is no inherent, objective, independent tree there. Tree is simply a name, a concept that we apply upon those parts, and we can take apart each of the parts too and see that there is eventually nothing there. It's all a question of our imputing or naming.
yeah, that is a very good analogy. And we all have this tendency to see a tree and we think there's some essence or treeness in that tree when there's nothing within that tree. I think this is a very important logic, which relate to our Western culture or our current culture right now. A lot of people love to meditate nowadays. They practice meditation every day. And I teach meditation to my students sometimes, but I also notice how sometimes people just love to meditate, but don't know much about the philosophy of empty nature, for example. What do you think about this issue here? How people just want to meditate?
Well, the word meditate in Tibetan, gom, means to familiarize yourself with something. I think that people have different ideas of what meditation actually is. And if we take that particular definition of meditating, then meditation isn't simply sitting and closing your eyes or remaining focused in some way. Meditation can be sitting and contemplating a concept and familiarizing yourself with that concept to the point that it begins to change you. And so, for example, compassion. If we think about how we may not be happy, we are, if we really look at ourselves, we are not content with our situation. We are not truly happy all the time. But we look at others and we see the suffering that they're experiencing, and we recognize the degree to which we are dependent on others for everything that we have. And we begin to open our hearts to the fact that they are as unhappy as we are, if not much more so. And that process of thinking leads us to a point of wishing that we could remove the suffering that they're experiencing. If we truly recognize what suffering is, if we truly recognize the degree to which we are dependent on others, that feeling of responsibility towards them and that wish to somehow be able to remove that suffering comes about naturally. That process that I've just described is a meditation. And if we then can sit and cultivate that in a formal way, not just once, but every day. And as we walk around the world, seeing people who are unhappy, someone, begging for money because he or she has some kind, even if they have an addiction, they're alcoholic, whatever it is, they're suffering. And out of a recognition of their suffering, we develop this wish to remove that suffering, so that in our daily lives, as we walk around, that feeling of compassion grows. That's meditation. It has to be something that we work on and then affects our lives.
So compassion is not something just we talk about, but it's something you need to cultivate, to work on, as well as having good theoretical understanding of it, right? To see the relationship between what makes you come from everything that's not you, and what makes you come from every other people's helping hands. So the theoretical understanding of this is very important, which I think for people who love to do volunteer work, how important is this understanding of, let's say, emptiness for people who are interested in volunteerism, helping others?
So, as I described the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of the tree before us, that exercise is really to prepare us to recognize the emptiness of ourselves. And the root of all our problems is our self-cherishing qualities, negative qualities, such as pride, such as attachment, such as anger, all come from this sense of self. It is this self that feels that we are special, that we are important, that is pride. It is the wish to satisfy that self that is attachment, desire. It is the feeling of having been attacked, that out of which comes anger. The fact that we're not getting our way. So at the root of all that is a sense of me. And if we can take the parts of ourselves and remove them and recognize that there is no core me, there are simply these elements, physical and mental, that sort of dance about, and that out of that experience we hold on to a sense of me. If we familiarize ourselves with that over time, studying, contemplating, meditating, slowly that core sense of me begins to evaporate. And it is only as we go about that, it is only as that core sense of me dissipates that we will be truly concerned with others, that we will be truly compassionate, loving, patient, humble. I'm thinking of the sort of the qualities that we usually attribute to a spiritual practitioner.
I think a genuine compassion is really when that core sense of me slowly evaporated away. At that time, only then the true compassion will really come out. I think that's a very important concept that all our audience should remember from your teaching. I guess I'm going to have one last question because we're almost out of time, but I'm going to bring back to photo again, since we're coming back, since you're the monk with the camera. One question is, can you share more on the types of photo you like to take, and what do you wish your audience to learn from your photos? For example, like you take black and white photos. Is there some sense or meaning behind it? So what is the take-home message for us by looking at your photos?
You know, I don't really photograph with an idea of creating something that is necessarily going to be important to someone else. I just try to create photographs. You mentioned black and white. I started photographing back in the 60s when all one could do was black and white. There was no real choice. Some people use slide film, and then you had to view those pictures with a slide projector. It was all in black and white. You could create prints. I'm a real believer in the print. Color is a very difficult thing to do. I just don't think that I'm a good enough photographer to really master color. When you're working at photographing, bringing into harmony the elements before you in a way that make a powerful picture, to add in color is like more than I can handle. Sometimes I use a color camera and I work at photographing in color sort of as an exercise. But so it's not that I see photography as a way of making a point, creating images that are going to be important. I just do it the way one might write poetry. You just write to express yourself in a way that if someone reads it and is moved by it, wonderful. But you're really trying to sort of put your ideas and your feelings together in a way that works. That's all I try to do.
Thank you so much for your to be with us. I think one thing I learned from you is just that naturalness. When you take photos, just take photos. When you practice Dharma, just practice Dharma. Don't like try to use one and pretend to use it, one to practice another one. I think that I think the way you present yourself has a lot of value to audience like me. So I'm very grateful to meet you. at Cafe 229. We thank you for being here. Really wonderful meeting you.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Pleasure meeting you. So for our audience, we're in next month, we will have Dr. Joanne Chen join us, which you have met her as one of the interviewer today. Dr. Joanne Chen is a classic pianist and a mindfulness researcher. She's one of the earliest musician actually that studies mindfulness. So we're very happy to have her. She will be talking about the relationship between music, mindfulness, and compassion. She will also live demonstrate some piano pieces for us. So her webinar is called The Music Without Border, A Pianist's Journey with Mindfulness. And it's going to be on February 19th at 7 p.m. So we see you then. Thank you for watching tonight.